Welcome back to the Talk of the Town podcast. I'm your host, Andy Burrows, and Steve-O, we're back. How was your break, my friend?
It was good. Had a few nice weekends away. Some quite hectic ones as well, but really good. But as you know, there's not too much for a break, really. Maybe kind of the first few days after the end of the season, I had a bit of downtime, but then contacting players, and you're already getting to work really in terms of planning for the season ahead.
The big news, obviously, since I was with you, 3 weeks ago since I've seen you, the league structure's been put out pending appeals, obviously. What did you make of it? Obviously, AFC Welling, Sawbridgeworth, Risborough, Harlow Town, Kings Langley obviously dropped down into our league. What did you make of it? Everyone on social media that I've seen said it's going to be a really competitive league now. Back to 20 teams as well, which is really good. What did you make of it when you saw it?
Yeah, first thing I looked at really was that it was back to 20 teams, because I think that was obviously something that we'd spoke about previously. And from my perspective, I think that's a better situation to be than 18. I appreciate that, it's an extra 4 fixtures and a bit of, congestion maybe, but you want to play as many games as possible as far as I'm concerned. So I think that's a really good part of it. It's going to be super strong. Like you say, there's some of the teams that you just mentioned there are going to be in it, and they're going to be really competitive. You just glance through the teams, and you look at it, and there's probably going to be more than a dozen teams who are going to fancy their chances of competing in that top 5. And obviously some of those, are going to be having the ambition to win the league as well. So, it's exciting. It's a great challenge for us. We want to be right at the very, very top there and challenging for promotion. That's obviously the aim for next season. But as I said, there's probably, a dozen other teams that are going to have the same type of ambition. So, really exciting. I looked at it, and there's going to be some really great fixtures. Some different grounds for us to be able to go to. There's a few more artificial pitches this year. Obviously Harpenden and Crawley last year, but you add in, AFC Welling playing at Potter's Bar, Haringey, Harlow. So that'll be there. We'll have a few more midweek trips and those types of things as well. But yeah, positive. Look, I looked at it and I thought it was great. We're going to be testing ourselves up against some really good clubs. There's going to be a lot of good players about. And as you say, there's been a lot of mention in terms of it looking, the strongest it's been for a while. I would probably agree with that. I always think it's a competitive league. It's always a challenging league, but I think that the quality in the league next year will be really strong.
What do you make of some of the restructuring? Obviously, Risborough were with us, not last season before. They got moved. Obviously, Harlow have come into the league. Sawbridgeworth are back. They were with us the same year that Risborough got moved. As a manager, we're very lucky where we are. We're kind of central being Dunstable Town. We're not really in that bracket of getting moved to another league. I know some of these leagues were mocked up where we might have been somewhere else. But when you look at teams like Sawbridgeworth, Harlow and Risborough, do you feel for some of these clubs where they just you never really know from season to season what league you're going to be in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that side of things, I think is, like you say, season to season, you could get moved. I think that's probably, not the easiest, but,
football, isn't it?
It is. And also, I'm probably not going to be very popular by saying this, but I don't really have a lot of sympathy, because if you're ambitious, you're going to try and get yourself into a higher level, and your travelling distances get greater anyway. And I appreciate, look, there's rewards that come with that, and the player group that you might be able to recruit from, etc., kind of improves. But I think if you're ambitious and you want to go and do things, that's going to be a part of the consequence of doing it. Now, yeah, look, I appreciate it's not ideal, for clubs and travelling, but it's a part of non-league. Ultimately, whatever decision whatever teams will put, there's going to be complaints. Like that's just the nature of it, and it is that way. And I think that, from my perspective, last year we only had 18 teams in the league because they weren't able to try and get the geography right in terms of doing it. Again, I don't know what will happen, obviously, as you say, with appeals and stuff. So that can happen as well. And we've seen that in the past where, teams have swapped leagues and stuff based on, mutual appeals and things like that. So, it might change, but you've got to kind of swallow it and deal with it and get on with it, really. Like you say, maybe it's easy for me to sit here and say that, in a fortunate position because we're in the same league again, as we were last year. But yeah, my view on it is that if you want to play football at a good level, if you're not willing to make that little bit of sacrifice in terms of travel and, you have to change your work arrangements, stuff like that, that's the deal. That's kind of what it's about. So, yeah, maybe, some people might be a bit more sympathetic to it, but maybe I'm not so much.
Yeah, no, you're right. If you want to go up the leagues, see, hopefully touch wood, we're sitting here this time next year and you go up to step 4, step 3, you're going to you're going to, the higher you go, the more you're going to travel. What's the main focus as we're heading into, we're about 4 weeks away now for pre-season, Steve. So the boys are back. You're pretty much back already. We're doing bits and bobs behind the scenes with the media stuff and like getting ready to help you. What's been the main focus as we head into pre-season for you? I know you obviously say you're on the phone to players and stuff, obviously retaining players. So it's a busy, you said to me at the back end of last season, you're going to be busier now because during the week we sit here on a Thursday and a Tuesday and a Saturday. It's easy. Not easy, but we're in football mode. Yeah. Now is really when you're really busy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that, you know, the difference at this stage of the season is that the structure kind of goes out of it a little bit, and you've got to kind of almost, from like my perspective, you've got to kind of create your structure to try and work around. Otherwise, it really does become all consuming. But as you say, during the season, once you've kind of got your squad settled, you kind of get into that routine of Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and you kind of know what's to come. Whereas, you know, it's phone calls every day and it's all different bits and pieces. But, you know, I'll be honest, it's not one main focus, right? Because there's so much that we have to do. You know, there's arranging the pre-season schedule. You know, that's obviously something that we've done. I'm really excited about what we've done with that this year. As you say, talking to players who we want to obviously retain and keep, you know, that process is still ongoing. It's been really positive so far. Which is great news for us, obviously well documented, and we spoke many times last year about the difficulties of coming in without a group essentially last season, and you'd almost started from scratch. You know, we're going to be in a much better position than that this year, and that core of the team that we built last season and had a good second half of the season will be with us. So that's really positive. You know, as you say, recruiting, you know, that's obviously a big part of what we need to do. It's, you know, it's not going to be the case where we're going to be adding 10, 12 players this year, or obviously last year, you know, you're bringing in 20 odd in pre-season to take a look. You know, we're really targeted in terms of the players that we're trying to add this season. But that's a difficult process as well. You know, I'm fully respectful of players at this time of the year. And, you know, I remember being a player. It's actually a little bit longer ago. I did play a game yesterday and I felt pretty, remembered how long ago it was. But, you know, you only just finished the season and you have got, you know, you've probably got, you know, if you're a good player, you've got 8, 9, 10 managers who are kind of on your case straight away. And it can be a lot. So, you know, you have to kind of be respectful of players at that point because they've got decisions to make. But, you know, it's obviously for myself to kind of sell what we're doing here. It's made a lot easier by obviously the improvements we made last year, and the lads we were able to retain and keep. So, it's a really challenging, it's a challenging part. It's enjoyable. You know, it's great to talk football with players and to understand what's going on. So, but as I say, there's not really one main focus. You know, we're talking about how we want to set the team up next year, you know, working with Rich and Liam on that particularly. You know, we're here going to make sure we've got all the equipment right, you know, training bucket, everything that you've got to be able to do. And really it's a month before we're back properly, and it all needs to be in place for then. So lots of action, lots of activity going on, making sure we're in the best place possible, and it's been a really positive start to that so far.
What's some of the biggest challenges negotiating in non-league level? We mentioned at the time how we watch Premier League and there's transfer windows. As a non-league manager, what are the biggest challenges for you guys, would you say?
I think it's trying to differentiate yourself a little bit. I think that I feel it myself when I'm having conversations with players and stuff. You don't want to be cliche in terms of what you say you're about. And I think that it's actually more important kind of showing what you're about. And often that's kind of, you know, people actually seeing what you do. I think that you guys actually played a really important part of that. And I've had certain conversations this year with people who, you know, we probably want to add someone to our coaching staff this year. You know, some of the playing group, you know, they've seen the footage that you guys do, you know, some of the training stuff. So actually when you talk to them and go, actually, this is how we train and this is what it looks like, I can have that conversation, actually point them to something that exists there that people can see. So I think that you want to differentiate yourself. It is a bit of a player's market at this stage of the season because, you know, they don't have to jump into any decisions. So, you know, you've got to kind of be mindful that you're going to kind of, you have to cast your net quite wide. You know, we had a really, really good list of players that we wanted to go for this year, and it's deep, you know, but we're very targeted in terms of who we've gone for. But you know, there's no commitment at this stage of the season. You know, I see obviously there's, you know, clubs will announce signings and stuff like that and players that are joining and at different points in time. But, you know, we've seen it in the past as well. That's doesn't always match up to what actually happens on the first game of the season. So really it's a bit of perseverance. But you know, say it's just about getting your message across. And I think that, you know, I'll certainly feel like, you know, from my own personal perspective, it's obviously my second time doing it in terms of a pre-season. So I think that's been a little bit easier for me. You know, learned a few lessons from last year with that. But as I said, you know, the strength of having had a pretty decent season in the end, given how we started, and, you know, some good momentum from that. You know, we've got some good players in the group now that people can reference against and recognise, well, actually, if those players are going to be at the club, that's somewhere that I'd want to be able to go and play. But you know, the other conversations are like, it's budgets, it's all those types of things. You know, you've got to balance it all. But, like I say, I think my primary focus has really been, you know, making sure that we're still going to get the right characters, you know, in the group. And, you know, so you're really going through that in the process as well. When in terms of recruitment, you really want to, you know, look, it's about you selling what you do. But it's actually about trying to recognize what, you know, the person who you're trying to bring in, what they want from their football next season. And then being really honest and trying to recognize whether that really lines up with kind of what we're looking for. I've been really thankful so far that I think a lot of the conversations that I've had, that, you know, that those are players that I've known in the past. So, you know, I'm comfortable that they would fit in terms of what we do. But also in that, you know, I spoke to some really good, you know, good young players, some good characters who I think would add a lot to the group. So I think, yeah, it's again, there's lots of challenges with it, but it's about trying to find the right balance as well. You know, it's easy to think that you can go and speak to 50 players and then they all rock up here in pre-season and then you go in, actually, how do we put this all together? That's obviously not really my style in terms of how we work. So, yeah, it's that balance between making sure you're speaking to the right players, and that they're going to be the right fit for the club.
Yeah, definitely. Last one, Steve. How different will pre-season look this season coming? Pre-season, obviously, it was about a year ago that I saw our interview, your very first interview, come up on my feed the other day. Pre-season was pre-season last year, but you were trying to build an entire squad last season. How much are you looking forward to this campaign and this pre-season? Like you say, you've announced some great games. We've got like Sarah at Leighton Town. We've got the game against Hartford. We've got some really good games. But for you personally, and as your coaching team and players and all of us involved with the club, this pre-season is going to be very different, because it was so difficult for you last year. You were coming in and pretty much had to rebuild an entire team. This year it's more settled. You're bringing in a group. But what sort of pre-season are we going to see? Yeah,
so I think, look, you're right with that. I think that there was so much of what we did last year, which was, you know, and I don't think we got the balance right. And, you know, we spoke about that when we did a bit of a review at the end of the season, where, you know, we initially started to try and, you know, establish the way that we were going to play without really knowing the players that we had. And so, you know, your training sessions were kind of a bit of a mix of, right, this is what we want to go be able to do, but we didn't actually know whether the players were going to be good enough or not. You know, we didn't know enough about the players. We were trialing players essentially all the way through pre-season. There wasn't really any stability with that. Now, this is obviously going to be very different as we go into approach next season. So, you know, we're going to have, you know, we're going to have that core group from last year, which is crucial. They're going to have a real comfort in terms of obviously how we work, and look, things will change. You know, we'll evolve some stuff. We'll move some stuff forward, which I think is really important. But I think, you know, what we'll be able to do is go back to that and go, you know, those fine details that we need to work on, those areas of our game that we need to be better at next season. We'll get the opportunity to be able to work on that in pre-season. And also just going into the games as well, you know, it won't be the case as much again. Last season, you're going into those pre-season games and effectively you're looking at them as trial games. You know, you're looking at them at the games and you're kind of looking at and going, you know, I'm going to try this pairing there and what do they look like? Or I've never seen this lad play an actual game. I'm going to go and put him here. And that's a lot more difficult than where we'll be this year, which is, you know, there'll be a large majority of the teams that the selections that we put out in pre-season where everyone will know them. They'll have played with each other. And it will be actually about, you know, embedding those new players and seeing what new qualities that they add to the group. And it will be about getting us ready for that first game of the season. So, I think it will be very different. It will feel very different. You know, in that sense, it'll still be familiar in terms of our structure and our organisation. I think that will be similar. And obviously, look, there's a lot of the same personnel actually as last pre-season. It will just be, you know, we'll be a lot more comfortable with each other, at that stage. And, you know, the focus will be on, let's say, in terms of a little bit more on how we play.
Brilliant. Steve, well, it's good to be back at work. Just one more thing before we get out of here. The man behind the camera, I've got to give him a special mention. He won Clubman of the Year. He wasn't here at the awards night. Don't know where he was, but big shout out to Brad. Obviously, he does all the work for our YouTube. Won the Clubman of the Year. Fully deserved, mate. I'm very proud of the work he does with us.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, he stands up in the cold often in those home games, and but yeah, like I say, every week he's here. Fantastic to work with, and like I say, embodies kind of what this club's about. So yeah, very appreciative and well deserving of it.
Yeah, well done, Brad. You've got to win something next year. The bet still stands for this coming season. He's going to be in front of the camera. Steve, great to be back at work, mate. Good to see you.